Hey everyone. Hey, wait a minute. Let me do this in a manner appropriate to the news. Hey everyone. No, but this is fucking disappointing and a big old piss off as far as I'm concerned because it's just another piece of evidence that sorry, but all you people out there, well not the people that watch my videos, but the rest of the people out there that think that Canada is a free country. Right. Oh, you believe the bullshit they tell you, right? While you're locked in your little cage and they micromanage every aspect of your life, whether it's social or economically, you just keep on believing. You just keep believing in your political masters. Your belief in them. Oh, they love it. They're very appreciative of the fact that you actually believe them when they tell you you're free and your freedom is what matters most. And in a democracy, freedom exists. I can't even keep a straight face. Like I say, it's all bullshit, folks. And what are we at now? I think I've gone through the alphabet. A, B, C, D, D. So we're back to what? Exhibit A once again. And, you know, it's regards to that Gerard Como case. You know, Free the Bear. You know, that court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. I mean, Section 121 of the Constitution has some pretty plain, clear, and concise language, right? I'm just going to reference it now. Section 121 of the Constitution Act, 1867. All articles of the growth, produce, or manufacture of any one of the provinces shall, from and after the Union, be admitted free into each other provinces. Right? But once again, politicians are lawyers, or I repeat myself, right? They just use political spin. Like I say, it's ruled by edicts, folk, and the Supreme Court unanimously suggested to Canadians that, no, we don't understand plain English. And we will misconstrue that plain English to represent whatever we damn well please. So, you really believe in your freedoms, Canada? Are you smelling that stench? Because, yeah, it stinks pretty bad. And if you don't, then you might want to get yourself to the doctor. Anyways, I'm going to be referencing the Maclean's article. It's been covered by all the establishment media, but I just wanted to touch down with this article by Scott Gilmore out of Maclean's here. Canada is not a country. That's the headline. Scott Gilmore. If our ragtag federation can't build pipelines, move beer, or find common bonds, we may have a fatal problem. You think? I mean, look at Trudeau out there. They're always talking about these, look at NAFTA, a gender equality bull fucking shit, crap, right? Like pure socialist nonsense. Or the fact that, illegals can cross the border to the tune of thousands and thousands. I just did a video prior to this covering that this year it's ramped up even further. But yet you can't, and that's all good. That's all good. And you Canadians, hey, you better pony up, bend over, and lube up because you're going to be paying for all that shit. But hey, if you want to take a few beers across the border between Quebec and New Brunswick, or if you want to actually take the oil that's produced or extracted in Alberta and send it to the east or the west coast, no, you can't. None of that. Like I say, so how is this actually like it suggests? How are we even a country or a federation, right? Like I said, folks, rhetoric that was written on a piece of parchment or paper 100 years ago or 150 or 200 or whatever years ago and don't mean a whole lot if people aren't willing to hold their authorities or the political masters to account when they try to stray away from that reality, from that logic, or from what the Constitution is supposed to represent. I want to fly up to northern Manitoba next month to visit my parents. It's not a long flight. I live in the province next door, and with a connection in Winnipeg, I can do the trip in an afternoon. It is expensive, though. For the same amount of money, I could fly to Peru and back 3 times and still have change left over for some in-flight duty-free. I could fly to any state in America, any country in Europe, a dozen cities in Africa, and almost every country in Asia, North Korea, and Timor-Leste accepted. I normally just wince and buy the ticket, knowing that this is just the way it is in Canada. But this time I stopped and considered how odd it is that I live in a country where it is easier, cheaper, and often faster to travel overseas than it is to do so domestically. And once I started pulling on that thread, several other things started to unravel. Yeah, once you start down that rabbit hole, yeah, you don't know what's down there at the bottom waiting for you. Douglas Coupland once described British Columbia as part of a cultural Chile, a West Coast community that ran from San Diego to Prince Rupert, tied together with an integrated economy, a similar lifestyle, and a common worldview. Growing up in Alberta, this resonated with me as I felt I had more in common with someone in Montana than I did with Montrealers or a Haligonian, two cities I had never even visited. Whether Canada's cultural communities run north-south into the United States is less important than the fact that they do not run east-west. We often talk about the two solitudes based on the idea that French and Anglo-Canadians live very different and unconnected lives. This is indisputable. We watch different shows, listen to different music, name any of the current top 10 musicians in Quebec. Go ahead. I dare you. I challenge you. Without looking it up. Hold different values. If you don't believe that last point, consider any public opinion survey. Quebec is an outlier on nearly every question from abortion to world affairs. But there are often solitudes too. Less than 10% of Canadians have ever visited the North. And those who have come from only a handful of cities such as Winnipeg. Remove the language and there are fewer cultural similarities between Newfoundland and Saskatchewan than you would find between France and Belgium. What is more, the proportion of Regina residents who have actually been to St. John's is a fraction of the Parisians who have been to Brussels or Berlin. Stephen Harper anointed Quebec a nation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced that Indigenous Canadians are a nation. Conceivably, a future Prime Minister may continue that trend and for some political advantage describe Maritimers as a nation or South Asian Canadians as separate cultural identity. And why not? No one has ever successfully argued that Canadians are a people. We do not even pass the most rudimentary test of a nation and those united by common descent, history, culture, or language. As the current PM himself has said, there is no core identity, no mainstream in Canada. And it is increasingly difficult to argue that Canada is a state, or at least a strong one. Being a Canadian citizen does not always entitle you the right to work or study in another province. It does not even allow you to carry a few cases of beer across a provincial border. Goods and people move far more freely within the European Union than they do within this country. And that is not simply a choice made by the federal government. It has always been too weak to assert its alleged authority over the provinces. Yes, you can argue that legally Ottawa could knock down these barriers, could allow an Ontario carpenter to work in Quebec, for example, but in truth, every federal government has lacked the political power to do so. Some definitions of statehood refer to having a monopoly on violence. We meet that criteria. There is only one Canadian military, but it has atrophied to the point that our Navy is no longer able to fully assert sovereignty over our maritime boundaries. And our Army doesn't even make an attempt in the Arctic. And in one important regard, Ottawa is perhaps not even a legitimate power. Consider that fully democratic governments are only found in provinces and cities, not at the federal level. There are no unelected, unaccountable lawmakers in our provincial legislatures and our city halls, thank God. That world needs more Canada. The cliche is well used around here. We love to revel in our progress as a post-national state, but it's possible that as Canada evolved from geographically proximate European colonies to whatever we are now, a ragtag federation that can't build pipelines or move beer, we skipped right over the national stage. So if Canada is not a people, not a nation, possibly not even a nation state, what are we? I would argue we are merely a collection of people who happen to be moving in roughly the same direction. Occasionally we have a leader who marshals us together to walk us in one particular direction or to march to a specific rhythm, but only occasionally and never for long. No, we remain the same color on the map, not because of a strong sense of shared identity or a common purpose, but because we simply haven't had much of a reason to split up yet. So far, this nationhood by happenstance has worked out for us. Our quality of life is one of the highest in the world. A recent survey ranked those of us who live here as among the happiest. We have had a couple of brushes with dissolution, but survived, and the future looks good until the day when suddenly it doesn't. One lesson that the last 20 years has reinforced is that there are far more black swan moments, completely unanticipated game-changing events out there than we realize. It is almost inevitable that this country is one day going to face some unexpected shock. It could be the rise of another charismatic, iconoclastic regional politician who points to Ottawa as the source of all that is wrong. It could be an economic crisis that dramatically pits one region against the other. Perhaps it might even be a technological advance that changed our culture in ways we cannot even imagine now. When that day comes, we may realize that we took for granted those few ties that bound us, and we did far too little to add to them and to draw them tighter. I was once told by someone wiser than me that a successful marriage requires a constant effort to find connections. The relationship must be continually maintained and strengthened, because otherwise, when the bad times inevitably arrive, it will be too late. I feel this may apply to Canada. These are sunny days, but the weather will change. And when the storm arrives, we may discover that Canada was never really a country after all. In one way, there's some positive aspects to this, and in other ways, there's some very negative aspects. This is where it's just being, like I say, whether it's moral or legally consistent, it's of paramount important, folks. If you're going to pretend to be a country, then you have to function. If you're going to pretend to be a family, you have to actually function in that kind of a realm that has values of a family. Otherwise, if you just want to play this, like they're suggesting, this ragtag, you just piecemeal and shit all together, or this multiculturalism, then just divvy everything up and let each one be a representation of that particular preference or ideology or social economic development. The one-size-fits-all approach in a country such as Canada, obviously, the only way that can ever happen to have a one-size-fits-all approach in a country so diverse as Canada is to literally, socially, or economically enslave everyone to that pretense. And any suggestion otherwise, well, I want to hear what you got to say. Like I said, that's why, to me, this is just another perfect example why individualism matters most. Collectivism, that race to the lowest common denominator, it doesn't work out. It hasn't worked out anywhere in the Western world as far as I can see. So once again, and the only way you'll have that happy family, whether it's in your personal setting, in a community, in a county, in a province, or in the country, is to have some very basic ground rules that everyone has to adhere to equally. Outside of that, yeah, it's just, once again, it's just a matter of everyone seeking to, when you have a federal government, then every province is going to seek regulatory capture or to gain control of that big gigantic gun in the room as a means to impose their own personal preferences, edicts, or opinions or ideology on everyone else. So no matter how you look at it, no matter if you're a federalist type or you're staunchly independent, it's not going to work out, folks. And the divorce that will happen, I suspect it will at some point, unless something drastically changes, right? It's going to be a rough one, folks. That's just the truth of the matter. Anyways, I'll post a link to this article in the description of the video below, but it is something that we all need to start thinking about tremendously and with a lot of in-depth conversation. It's Canadian Libertarian. I love liberty.